So do you remember, this just came in my mind, do you remember when Jesus heals the demoniac that was possessed by Legion?
Mm-hmm.
And this is on the other side of the Sea of Tiberias, the Decapolis, the Greek side. And so this isn't where Jews reside. And Jesus is getting back in his boat with his disciples, and this guy who's been cured, he's like, I want to come with you. I want to follow you. And what does Jesus say to him?
No.
And what does he say? He says, go back and tell your family what God has done for you.
Huh.
So there's this distinction between the public facing life and the out there missionary life, and this go back to your family and tell them what God has done for you. And it seems so small and minuscule, right? But he does. And you know how we know?
Oh.
Jesus returns back there, and that's where he has the other feeding of the crowds. And there a lot of, mostly Greeks, tons of Greeks are there, because he went back to the Decapolis, the 10 cities, told his family, became a family man, and everybody's looking at him going, what has happened? And they're like, this Jesus thing must be real. We got to find this guy. And then he feeds the multitudes.
Wow.
So this is what can happen is when we go back to our families and we really, really, truly decide to be little, silent, and hidden, because what is little, God will make manifest and large. What is secret, God will reveal. What is hidden, God will make known. We all want to be known, but we trade that out to be noticed. You know? God wants to know us and wants us to know ourselves by being known by him. So by diving into, Gaudium Spes 24 says, basically this: man discovers himself by becoming a sincere gift to another. Our wives, by being a gift to them, they then reflect back to us who we really are. They're like, you've got this talent, this gift, you're this, you're that. And then you discover so much more of yourself by becoming that gift to your wife, to your kids. You become the man beyond the achievement and the wealth and the fame that you would ever aspire to. But this is what we're missing in our culture. We're going out there rather than going back in there to the vocation. Vocation, the Latin root word is vox, voice. Mm-hmm. When we chuck our vocation, we no longer can truly discern the vox, the voice of God. All of this, as little as it is, but for me, it's crazy. It's born out of my vocation. It's a direct consequence of my vocation. So I'm not defined by what I do for a living. I'm defined by who I live for. My occupation is at the service of my vocation as a husband and father. It's not the other way around, but this is what we're doing. We're inverting it. We're placing our family at the service of our vocation at the service of our occupations, so everybody will know how great we are. And meanwhile, a Hispanic priest said this to me one time when I was really struggling, because I just felt like I should be more, I should measure up. I just felt so much like a failure. And we can get into vainglory too. It's huge. Bob Schutz, I think, had a big part in healing me of that, or I'm still being healed of it. But this Hispanic spiritual director said, we Hispanics have a phrase, do not become a street lamp only for your house to go dark. Yeah. And I was like, yeah. I'm standing around in the corner being that light of Christ. And meanwhile, my house was going dark. And so Anna Marie, it was amazing. Anna Marie ended up, that hypoxia event, ended up having CP trapped inside of her body. And I had no other choice really but to figure out how to embrace it. It was nurse neglect. And this was the beginning. So when they rolled Anna Marie across the tarmac, the head nurse said to us, my parents are present. They said, this is our fault. We'll do whatever we can to rectify this situation. That never happens. They never admit malpractice. She did. So my wife's sister was married to a multi-millionaire. He calls me up and says, Devin, we'll take care of all the attorneys, legal fees. We'll file the suit. We got this. Just let us know when you want to do this. Well, as I'm dealing with Anna Marie, who literally for the first 3 years of her life, basically all she did was scream because she couldn't communicate. She's stuck in her body. And literally the insanity of all that, right? But as I considered filing the lawsuit, I found myself distancing myself from Anna Marie because I was saying, that's not what God wanted for us. She's not the daughter that God wanted for us. They took her from us. And that's a position I was holding to file this lawsuit or the potential of it. But I found myself slipping into this massive depression and spiritual darkness, and I was trying to pray through it. And I'm like, Lord, you got to deliver me from this depression. You got to deliver me from this darkness. And a voice, whatever you want to call it, said, forgive them. And I'm like, forgive who? Forgive the doctor and the nurses. I'm like, there's no way. And so I kept spiraling into this self-implosion of spiritual darkness. And then finally, in a moment of desperation, I called the head nurse. I explained who I was, and I said, I release you from your debt. And it was in that moment that I began to not just accept Anna Marie, but to choose her. And I think this is what's missing from fatherhood these days. We accept our children. They live in the same house with us. They eat with us. They sponge off of us, whatever, our Netflix account. But we don't choose them. We don't sit down with them and look them in the eye and talk about life. We don't take them on daughter dates and man dates. And we don't spend that time in saying, I choose you. I delight in you. I desire you. And
how did the nurse respond when you said that? Did she remember you?
Yeah.
I don't know how long the period of time was.
Yeah, it was pretty months, and she did. She remembered me, and she was so grateful. But it was in accepting Anna Marie. Jesus says in Matthew 18, whoever receives one such child receives not only me, but the one who sent me. And I realized through Anna Marie, and it takes a long time, that by receiving this child of Anna Marie, I was receiving Christ, and I was receiving the spirit of fatherhood. And then she became the power behind the apostolate and the ministry. I've learned so many lessons from her. I mean, she's an incredible, joyful kid. She's almost like autistic. She could hardly communicate, and yet she got to this point where all of a sudden she was singing these Christian songs, and she had them all memorized. But yet she could hardly communicate. And then in 5th grade, she's confined to a wheelchair. Happy kid. She comes home sobbing one day off the bus. She's just sobbing. It's so unlike her. And she has trouble talking, so we're trying to figure out what's going on, and we're asking her questions, and this goes on all the way into dinner. And finally we figure out that some knucklehead at school was making fun of her, saying she'd never walk. And her little brain, she figured it out. And so I picked her up from, her chair, and I carried her into her bedroom, and I was rocking her. Sitting on her bed, and she's sobbing because it's so emotional for her. She can't handle her emotions. And but then at one moment, her eyes open up, and she sees the crucifix on the wall. And then a smile gradually comes across her face. I'm like, Anna Marie, why are you smiling? She goes, and this is from a mental handicapped kid. I get to suffer with Jesus, and that makes me happy. I'm like, man, I've read Aquinas, I've read Augustine, but nothing has hit me like that. She's taught me so much. She's taught my wife so much.
Hey, thank you so much for watching. Before you go, do us a favor, leave a comment, let us know what you thought of the video, like, and subscribe.